Hi, so for this screencast, I'll be talking about the findings from my research inquiry that I've been working on this semester to attempt to answer the questions, what is the experience of students who do not speak the dominant discourse in the classroom, and how can teachers best bridge this gap to create a classroom where all students feel free to pursue the wonder of learning? I was made aware of the importance of talking about different discourses and what they look like in a classroom setting, partially from the work of Gallagher Gertson, who talks about the privileges that come with speaking the dominant discourse. This privilege creates a hierarchy within society, and that includes the classroom, that disadvantages any students who don't speak the dominant discourse, which is the language that has been deemed as academic or professional. So I've created a visual to help express my findings regarding how teachers can reach students who speak different discourses. It's important to note that while there are many ways a class can be diverse and there are many different discourses, the students I found the research on was centered on the experiences of minority students. Okay, so first, speaking a different discourse from your students should not be used as an excuse for students not learning in your class. This is something that Burt and colleagues investigated when they did research on how the race of a teacher affects students' attitude and achievement. They found that while some students feel more comfortable with teachers who share their race in common because they feel like the teacher treated them like their family members would, overall students' attitude or achievement were not affected by the race of their teachers. The teachers in this study were all experienced and master teachers, though, so it's safe to say that in order for students to feel this way about teachers who do not come from the same background as them, the teacher has to be conscious about how they act and how they treat their students. So it is possible for teachers to reach students who have different ethnicities, cultures, discourses than their own, but there are some stipulations. So first, teachers must value their students' cultures and learn how to show this in the classroom. This was a major theme in many of the studies that I looked at. Specifically, Franquise Salinas' research reinforced the idea that in order to introduce new content to students, in the case of this study, it was English language learners, it's more effective to take the time to make an appeal to students' social and political prior knowledge, playing to their personal backgrounds, and to make space and time to allow students to take stances and make connections to the material. This takes time and effort, but it helps scaffold the new content and helps students become invested in the material. One example of this would be relating the social justice movement from the past to something students have experienced or see around them in their area or on the news, and then have the students communicate in whatever way helps them best express their emotions by writing a letter to a political leader of the time or to a newspaper editor. Not only will this personal connection help them value their own experiences, but combining these connections with an opportunity to express their own voices on the issues will help students value their voices and see how they can be used to create a change. Strawbar also supported this idea with his study showing that many students have aspirational and linguistic capital that stems from their unique culture and gives them a different discourse than the dominant discourse. Teachers should use this capital that minority students have in order to help them succeed. If students have the aspirational capital of wanting to succeed in order to help their families, for example, then a teacher has the opportunity to show them how what they are learning directly relates to the outside world and finding success in future careers. If students have linguistic capital of being in a class where there are other students who speak the same discourse as them, then the teacher can have purposeful time to allow students to communicate with each other more effectively with their primary discourse in order to understand lessons better. So if teachers value their students' cultures and see that although they are different, they give students experiences and ideas and connections that could help them learn content, they have to be purposeful about asking and finding out what the cultural capital their students have is, and then welcome it into their classroom. Additionally, teachers need to consider their students' cultures when making decisions regarding curriculum and assessment. So Kearns pointed out that students who don't speak the dominant discourse often struggle on standardized tests that only cater to the dominant discourse. While it's important to teach students how to code switch so that they're able to succeed on these mandatory tests, It's also something to consider when assessing your students' work in your classroom. You have to consciously decide, am I assessing my students' ability to code switch and speak the dominant discourse, or am I assessing their ability to multiply fractions or understand the Great Depression or whatever the content is? This idea also comes into play in Garrett and colleagues' research, where they found that students from different cultures recognize that their teacher cares for them in different ways. If a teacher wants to build a relationship of trust with their students, then they need to show them that they care about them as students and also just as people in general. If, as a result of their different cultures and discourses, students see different actions as evidence of someone's care for them, then the teacher needs to be purposeful about finding out what it is that the students see as affirmation of their compassion. This involves using language they understand and can relate to, and in finding out what their students value. Finally, it's important to remember why teachers need to be willing to put in this kind of effort, especially with minority students who don't speak the dominant discourse. Teachers do these things in order to avoid forcing cultural conformity on their students and creating feelings of inferiority and degradation. Kern's research showed that students' continual failure on tests that assessed their discourse more than their understanding of the content made them feel inadequate and marginalized. If students know they understand something but cannot express it in a certain way, they might question their learning and their own ability in the academic world. Additionally, it might hurt their motivation to continue on if their hard work only results in failure. If our students are failing over and over again, then we need to change how we assess them and how we teach them and not keep them in a cycle of failure. Similarly, in Strawber's research, it was noted that ELL students trying to learn the dominant discourse sometimes resisted practicing English because they did not want to be pressured to socially conform and lose their own cultures. As teachers, we need to prepare our students for the working world by giving them the dominant discourse they need as a tool, but we need to do so while still expressing a value for students' primary discourses. We need to celebrate diversity in our classrooms and allow students space to learn a new discourse and be welcomed into a new culture without forcing them out of their primary culture and discourse. If teachers work hard to value their students' cultures and discourses and consider the diversity in their classroom when planning curriculum and assessments, then they will be prepared to welcome all of their students into the Classroom Literacy Club so that everyone can pursue wonder together. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to your feedback. My next task for this inquiry blog is to create a text set that will be a tool for teachers to use to bridge the gap of having a different discourse from their students and help them value and consider their students' cultures. So thank you again for listening. Comment on this post if you have any questions or suggestions regarding this concept. Thanks.